In this session, we're going to take an overall look at total quality management, and we're going to specifically focus on the three quality gurus. We've talked about them previously, but I want to kind of go back through them to bring out more of the lessons we can learn from them, and then also review some of the current concepts of total quality management. Now, I refer to it as TQM or total quality management instead of Lean or Six Sigma, or possibly other phrases or terminology that you might be familiar with, because I think it's an overall philosophy, and I think it's easier to kind of look at it from a broader view when we're in this kind of course. So the gurus of quality management that we like to focus on are Shewhart, Deming, and Juran, and are considered the three founders of the quality improvement movement. Shewhart was the one that really introduced the idea of, statistical process control and the use of the control chart. We talked about this last week, but you capture data. The data usually falls within a certain range, at least that's what you expect. So it can be number of units, weight of units, size of units, some other characteristic that's important. And you establish some upper and lower control limits as well as what you would normally expect, and then you simply graph that information, and you use that information to identify any outliers or any other potential issues. The key thing is that we're trying to reduce variation. That's why it's so important to use the control charts. It's just a tool that helps us to distinguish between the different kinds of variation we might expect, some which we call assignable cause and some which we call random cause. An assignable cause means that we can assign the reason or the cause for that variation, whereas random cause may happen for no reason that we can identify. Deming and Juran built on some of Shewhart's lessons in the use of SPC, or statistical process control. In the early 1950s, post-World War II environment, like I've emphasized before, Japan was crushed. They lost the war, and their whole industrial base had been devastated, because previous to that, they were certainly one, much like they are today, one of the more sophisticated and advanced societies in terms of industrialization. The U.S., on the other hand, had won. Or at least led the victories in the Pacific and in Europe in a lot of ways, and felt quite confident or even cocky, if you will. So Deming and Juran, whose base was in the U.S. at the time, found that American business leaders weren't really that interested or weren't that serious about some of their concepts. So they went to Japan, and they worked with people like, or the folks from Toyota, amongst other companies, and really developed their own approaches. Very complementary to each other and overlap in a lot of ways, but Deming was more focused on philosophy and overall strategy, whereas Juran was more hands-on and prescriptive. And again, Deming was influenced by Shewhart. He went on to champion a lot of Shewhart's methods, in particular at the use of SPC. He argued that productivity can be increased by improving quality, and not just by doing your best or without guidance, but quality achieved by improving the process. And he introduced the concept of the Pdsa, Plan, Do, Study, Act. It's a continuous cycle of improvement, if you will. And based on the scientific method, you plan, you identify what can be improved, you implement the improvement idea, you measure and analyze the process or the outcome from the improvement, and if things are not the way you expected, or if they need further improvement, as many processes do, then you repeat the cycle again. And some of the ideas for improved processes can include uniformity of output, reducing mistakes, less waste of manpower, machine time, or materials, and reduction of waste frees the capacity to make more good parts. And you can see how these core concepts feed into the concept of lean management, where we talk about the 7 wastes. From a productivity point of view, productivity is improved by a change in the system affected by management, helping people to work smarter, not necessarily harder. So we also reviewed last week the Deming chain reaction. If you improve quality, this leads to cost decreases due to less rework, fewer mistakes, fewer delays, fewer snags, better utilization of machinery. Productivity therefore improves. This helps you to increase your sales, your market share due to better quality and lower price. You stay in business, more likely to stay in business, and provide more jobs and more opportunity. So Deming argued that before spending lots of money on technology such as automation to solve production issues, you should first focus on better administration of man and existing machinery. Deming further argued that paper profits make no contribution to material living for people, nor do they improve the competitive positions of firms or nations. Short-term profits are not an indication of good management. You may have deferred maintenance, you may cut out research, you may acquire another company, or you may eliminate inventory, for example, which hinders your ability to drive market share. So simple cost reductions that feed into short-term profits are not a good approach, or in the case of acquiring another company, just adding to the top line without necessarily managing bottom line is not so good. So he established 14 points for top management to act on and really focused a lot on top management. Remember, his driving things were, establishing a philosophy and were strategic. And so, a lot of focus on leadership and senior leadership and senior management. Juran was also influenced by Shewhart. He synthesized the various quality statistical tools with quality management concepts. He and Deming were both frustrated by U.S. management. They had a very superficial interest in managing quality, and U.S. quality systems were primarily based on inspection. Look at what you've already done rather than look at the overall process. And that was, that set the American industry up for a lot of failure in the long term. Short term, U.S. industry was in great shape in the 50s, but by the 60s and certainly by the 70s was starting to struggle and lose a lot of its competitive advantages versus European and Asian competitors in particular. So Juran's definition of quality was fitness for use, which leads to questions about who defines quality. Well, ultimately it's the customer, the user, if you will, to get even more specific. And they look at it as a bundle of attributes timely delivered to satisfaction that solves the customer's problem. Quality is defined by participants in a mutually beneficial exchange relationship, which makes an exchange beneficial to the recipient. So Juran further developed the definition of quality from the fitness of use: more or better features related to the design of the products and services. This he considers design quality, or freedom from deficiencies related to the delivery of the product or service, and they considered this delivery quality. Juran's economic perspective is that striving for superior quality is sound business economics. And this, when you put it in the context of in the same era, you had Milton Friedman, the economist from the University of Chicago, saying the business of business is business. So he maybe contradictory, complementary. How would you look at these two perspectives from the same era? Would you say that they fit well together, or do they contradict each other? So the business benefits of quality are competitive advantage, reduced costs, better customer satisfaction, improved bottom line profitability. And if you recall the Deming chain reaction, improving quality, cost decreases, leads to productivity improvements, increased market share, staying in business, and provide more jobs. Then we look at Juran's economic model, and improved features lead to larger market share and higher price and improved revenues, whereas reducing deficiencies lead to improved productivity, reducing scrap waste and warranty expenses, and therefore reduced costs. So improved revenues plus reduced costs lead to higher profits. Now if we shift gears and look at some current concepts of TQM, quality is defined as characteristics defined by the users, translated into specific attributes, or what we call specs, and then manufacturing is organized to ensure that the products meet the specs. So the American Society for Quality refers to quality as the totality of features and characteristics of a product or service that bear on its ability to satisfy stated or implied needs. If we step back a little bit and look at product versus service quality, we see that products, or how product is produced, matters little to the customer if the product fulfills quality expectations. Services is how service is produced matters a great deal to the customer. So food in a restaurant, tax return, car repair, they're all done on demand. And if we look further at the quality determinants of services, we look at things like reliability and responsiveness, competence, access, courtesy, communication, credibility, security, understanding, and knowing the customer, and other tangibles. The implications of quality related to the reputation, brand, domestically and globally, as well as liability or expenses due to poor quality. Costs of quality include prevention costs, appraisal costs, internal failure, and external costs. So Deming and Juran were not the only two. Deming, as we said, focused on management responsibility, Juran on continuous improvement. Another gentleman, Armin Feigenbaum, looked at integrated processes, and then Philip Crosby talked about quality is free. And you think about our process orientation, and you also think about our focus on eliminating or waste, and investing time and effort into doing things right the first time. That's really, instead of paying for poor quality down the road through lost sales, warranty costs, return items, repairs, that kind of stuff, Crosby argues that you invest that money in doing it right the first time, and therefore, there is no cost for quality. It's just simply good business. And this might be, to give Milton Friedman perhaps more credit than he might be due, might be where he's coming from. The business of business is business. There are different quality organizations out there. Perhaps the one that's most universal these days is the International Standards Organization, and they publish a set of quality standards for management procedures, leadership commitment, detailed documentation, work instructions, and record keeping across a number of different functions and a number of different industries. So TQM is a total organizational commitment focused on continuous improvement with a continuous improvement cycle. Six Sigma is an element of TQM, using statistical means to drive employee behavior ultimately. Employee empowerment, the concept that employees who are on the front lines, performing the functions, are really the people that are the most informed and therefore the most knowledgeable about how to improve quality. And then benchmarking is simply comparing certain processes against other competitors. If you want to look at delivery, global delivery, then you look at UPS, Federal Express, or FedEx, maybe DHL, to look at global delivery capabilities. And if that's important to your company, then it's who you want to benchmark against, as an example. Just-in-time or lean philosophies are also important. Let's explore lean a little bit more. Lean refers to, or lean manufacturing, any extra use of a resource other than to create value is a waste and should normally be eliminated. It was derived from Toyota, who really derived a lot of information from many sources, including Deming and Juran. So the Toyota production system, some of the terminology used in Japan, Jidoka, quality is built into the production system. So think about Philip Crosby and his quality is free concept. And just in time, each process produces only what is needed by the next process in a continuous flow. Just in time helps to reduce costs because you need less inventory sitting around waiting to be used. So you have lower overall inventory costs. Remember, inventory is an investment that you've made that you don't have a return on yet. So it's just sitting there. And this leads to improved quality because you're doing only what you need at the time. So if there's a problem, say with materials or whatever the items are that are sitting around waiting to be used, and it's a major problem, then you have smaller batches, only that amount that you need at the time, rather than bigger lots that have to be checked for quality issues, etc. So smaller batches exposes the quality sooner. So you add on a couple of key concepts, eliminate waste, called Muda, and seek continuous improvement, known as Kaizen in Japan. And these, building on this a little bit more, the 7 wastes of lean are overproduction, producing more than you need, unnecessary transportation, inventory, motion, making too many moves, if you will, when you're producing things or moving things around, defects, over-processing. Do you actually need to do that finishing step, or is it good enough? Is sort of a question in your mind. And then waiting, idle time, could be, right? So lean principles also emphasize a respect for people and teamwork. One more philosophy that we've touched on before with the discussion question on Elihu Goldratt is the theory of constraints. All systems have constraints, and the key is to identify the constraint and then restructure the system around the constraint. And the philosophical underpinnings are that organizations can be measured, they can be controlled, throughput or operational expense and inventory. Throughput is the rate at which systems generate money through sales. Inventory is money invested in buying things it plans to sell. And then operational expense is money spent to turn inventory into throughput. And there are 5 focusing steps related to the theory of constraints. First, identify the constraint, which is usually the resource or policy that prevents the organization from obtaining more of the goal. Second, decide how to exploit it, get the most capacity out of the constrained process. Third is to subordinate all other processes to the above decision, align the whole system or organization to support the decision made above. And fourth is to elevate the constraint, make other major changes needed to break the constraint. And 5, if as a result of these steps the constraint is moved, return to step 1. Don't let the inertia become the constraint. Another concept is operations is visual. So we use a lot of charts and graphs and displays, visual indicators and alarms and lights and other kinds of things as well to help us quickly gauge how things are going. If you walk into a manufacturing plant, you'll see a variety of different things like this. You may see the computer screen that shows an animation of the simulation of the process itself with different alarms and lights and other things on there as well to update people quickly on how things are going. Juran also had a trilogy. Deming had his 14 points. Juran had his trilogy. Management of quality consists of 3 functions: quality planning, quality control, and quality improvement. Quality planning is the preparing the launch of new product, service, and process to meet customer needs and expectations, minimize product and service dissatisfaction, and avoid costly deficiencies. Quality control theory, the results of a process are measured, and if the measured quality is not satisfactory, then changes are made to bring the process back on target. Quality improvement, a 6-step roadmap. Select a project that is important, define the project objective, diagnose root causes, develop a remedy and verify its effectiveness, and deal with organizational resistance to change. Institute controls to sustain the gains. This is analogous to the Six Sigma DMAIC roadmap. Define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So to wrap it up, quality management is about managing a process of continuous improvement to ensure the consistent quality in the eyes of the customer. Edward Deming and Joseph Juran are 2 of the key people who helped launch the TQM movement globally. We also talked about Shewhart, Feigenbaum, and Crosby. Statistical process control, a focus on process and quality is free, respectively. And then the effective gathering, analysis, and use of data information about processes supports total quality management systems. Thank you.